Morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fish room, and we've got John to the side. How you doing, mate? You happy?
I'm doing good. Nearly the weekend.
We're doing coffee.
Something like that.
I didn't put sugar in that.
Ooh.
I double shotted it and I didn't put sugar in it. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough chit chat. We've got ourselves a guest sitting there waiting for us. We're going to bring up Nelson Marcucci from Creekwood Aquatics. And you, sir, are on mute. You're on mute.
Fix it.
We'll just add that to the list of fun that's happened in the last 10 or so minutes. Right, so thank you very much for joining us. It's much appreciated. Do you want to let us all know how you got involved in aquariums and tropical fish?
All right, well, that's a very long story. My parents bought me a small fish tank. When I was a kid, it was about a 10-gallon tank. They had a bunch of neon tetras. And needless to say, it wasn't very successful the first couple go-arounds. I didn't start finding my passion for fish until I was a teenager. And I actually needed a job. I needed money. And there was a local pet store in the neighborhood that I lived. It's called Animals and Things. I got a job there when I was 16, and then the passion hasn't stopped ever since. I've been in this hobby for over 20 years. Some of my favorite memories is when my parents took me to replace the fish that we obviously didn't do well with. There was a small little mom and pop pet store. It was called the Perth Amboy, whatever pet shop. It was very simple. But I remember walking into that little store, and it was just a bunch of 10-gallon tanks, sponge filters, and I had a time of my life. And the owner there was super cool. He would talk to us about the stuff, show us the birds, show us the reptiles. But this is a hobby that I fell in love with when I was very young, and then I just continued doing it as a career. I've ran multiple small aquariums. I run a large one now, and I decided to move into the world of aquaculturing live foods and now opening a small fish room.
Cool. So when you say you run multiple small aquariums, you mean like public aquariums, not just small aquarium fish tanks type stuff?
Yes. After the Animals and Things, I worked at a PetSmart for a little bit. After that, I worked at a little restaurant called Rainforest Cafe where they had a 4,000-gallon marine system. I worked there for about a year, and after a year, I became the manager of the life support department. So we pretty much ran that 4,000-gallon exhibit for 6 years or 7 years until that place got shut down. Well, the aquariums got shut down. The restaurant still exists. And then I worked for a small fish store in New Jersey called Absolutely Fish. I was one of their aquarium technicians, so I would go out and service people's aquariums. I would work in the shop. I would sell freshwater, corals, all that stuff. And one day I decided, is this all I'm going to do, is work at a pet shop? I know I'm capable of more. So I applied for the aquarium manager position at the current zoo that I'm at, and they hired me. And that was 7 years ago, and it's been a whirlwind. And again, I got to that point where I said to myself, is this all I'm going to do with my career? So started my own business.
I absolutely love that questioning of yourself. Is this all that I'm going to do? And then pushing further. That's such a cool attitude, and it's such a great way to go. No, there's more of me. There's more of my life. I can do something else. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got to push yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. So you just then discussing, you went from basically hobbying into doing maintenance and stuff like that. What were some of the things you've learned from the progression from sort of hobbyist to the maintenance sort of side of things and looking after public aquarium, and then into your role now? Because there's a huge jump between those three scenarios and those three roles.
It's a huge jump, but I think the biggest thing is when there's a problem or something comes up, even if you don't know the answer right away, it's okay to tell people, I don't know. but I will find out. A lot of this stuff, like when I started at Rainforest Cafe, the maintenance team would handle all like the pumps and the plumbing and all that stuff. And once I became the manager there, I stopped them and I said, you know what? I appreciate it, but these are my systems. So show me and I will handle it. So I learned how to rewire pumps, reseal them. I learned all the plumbing. I learned about the UV. I started working on the ozone systems, and building up all that knowledge always helped me with the next step. So when the job at the zoo became available, their biggest thing is they want a life support person. They want someone there who can work on pumps, who can fix ozone and keep the systems running. And I was like, you know what? I already have that experience. I've already been doing it. So yeah, again, if you don't know the answer, it's okay to tell people you don't know. You can figure out. The other thing is there's a time to be cautious and go slow, especially when like you're cycling an aquarium. And there's times where you got to move fast. Like you get in a fish water, let's say that box got delayed by a day or two. Those fish are sitting in that water full of ammonia. Well, you're not going to sit there and water test and be like, this needs the perfect parameters. No, at that point, you got to get those fish out of that box. So you get them out, start acclimating them quick to the system, because there's one thing I tell my guys when fish are sitting in that nasty water for so long. When you start doing the slow drip, you start raising that pH, the ammonia starts becoming more toxic. So I tell people there's times to move fast, there's times to move slow. It's your job to figure out which one you need to do.
You just mentioned ozone. That's something that I haven't looked into very much. I have very briefly looked into it a while ago. Can you explain that a little bit, please?
All right, I'm going to be a big nerd, but I love ozone. So we use ozone on our giant hippo system. It's about a 10,000 gallon system, and these hippos are just giant manure organic waste machines. So that water, within a couple hours, will start to turn green. So we need to use ozone. So the first step is we have an oxygen concentrator. So our oxygen gets compressed. It separates, so we're dumping out all the nitrogen, carbon dioxide, all that stuff. We're just left with 90%, 90% oxygen. We pass that oxygen through a plasma block. It basically sends an electrical current. It separates the oxygen, and then the oxygen reassembles real quick. So it goes from O2 to O3 and O4, which is a very unstable element. It has a half-life of about 10 minutes. We introduce that ozone now into a contact tank where it mixes in with our water. Since that bond for the oxygen doesn't want to hold together, it pulls itself apart. So it's ripping apart the organics, the bacteria, viruses, planktonic algae. It's oxidizing it, just like bleach. After that water now gets slowly reintroduced into the main aquarium. That ozone gas, which is still nasty and still very reactive, that actually vents out into the atmosphere. And then we have a machine called an ozone destruct. It's about 90-ish degrees, because that's when ozone goes back to oxygen. So we pass it through his heater, becomes oxygen. That oxygen gets vented out back into the atmosphere. That is a very simple way how ozone works. The other thing is what we're trying to achieve is an ORP value. ORP stands for oxidation reduction potential, and we want that to be around 350 millivolts to around 500. If you go past 500, you're going to burn your water, you're going to burn your fish, they're going to have a bad time. If you're below 350, your water clarity is going to suffer. So there's a sweet spot, and you have to constantly calibrate your probes to make sure that you're within the 350 to 500 range. My old boss said, if you want to know if your water's clear, throw a quarter into the tank, look straight down. If you can see which way the coin is facing, your water's clear.
So is that the same type of ozone system that you quite commonly see reef keepers at home utilizing?
Yeah, the reef keepers, yeah, they have it on a smaller scale, but yeah, it's the same thing. It's going to pass through. They don't necessarily have a plasma block, but they'll have a corona. Just imagine like a UV sterilizer. Actually, I'm going to round back in a second. But imagine like a UV sterilizer bulb that's unprotected, and then you're passing that air through it. I was going to come back around to it. You guys are familiar with ozone, UV sterilizers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The cool thing about UV sterilizers is that they actually produce a small amount of ozone because that bulb acts like the corona or acts like a plasma block. So basically the air that's inside that quart sleeve, if you ever open up the UV sterilizer and you give it a quick whiff, you're going to have a very sweet metallic-y smell. That is the ozone. But yeah, I told you, big nerd. But yeah, that's pretty much a lot of the what's going on with those machines. It's the same principles. You're passing oxygen through the corona, through plasma blocks, separating the oxygen, creating ozone, introduction to your system. And at low levels like that for the aquarist hobby, it's not dangerous. But the big industrial machines that I use, yeah, those will mess you up big time. And there has been times we have sensors on our buildings that tell you when your ozone is leaking out of the closet. And when you hear that alarm, you need to go into the room, hit the emergency stop button. Everything shuts down. You leave, open the door, and you come back within 30 minutes because that's when all the ozone breaks down. But if you're in there while that gas is in that room, you're going to have a bad time.
That sounds far too familiar for my liking. I mean, has that happened? Does it happen often, or can't you say
it happened? It happened to me at one of the other jobs that I had. Not this current one, but I walked into the building. I heard the alarm. This was when I was way younger. I was like 22 at the time, and I heard the alarm, and I was like, "Oh, I should go address that." But let me go put my stuff down. So I put stuff down in my office, and I'm like, "Oh, let me check the emails." So I start checking my emails. And I'm like, man, I don't feel right.
So that's what you call a learning moment.
Yeah, I was like, I don't feel right. And then when I opened the door to the room, it hit me, and I was like, okay, that's the problem.
One of the questions that we were going to ask is that what was one of the lessons that, or what was, let me bring the question up, sorry. What are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned at the San Antonio Zoo? So I guess that would probably fall into that category.
Oh, lessons that I learned. Again, it's just, working for a zoo, yeah, we're aquarists and we're displaying these animals. But also you have to provide a good guest experience so people want to come back and visit the zoo. So I try to find a happy balance between we create our exhibits so that they're dynamic enough so the fish can actually like enjoy it and swim through stuff. We try to do a lot of enrichment with our animals. But you don't want to create an exhibit for your eels where they're going to hide behind the rock wall all day. So you have to find a nice balance between what the animals need to be happy and healthy, but also you want to be able to display them properly for your guests, because them returning, them paying admission, pays for all the cool stuff we want to do behind the scenes. So working in public aquariums, you learn that there's a balance between, again, we call it the show, and the show is sacred. So anything that can affect the show, if your pumps go down, your lighting goes down, you have a dead fish in your tank. These are all things that affects the guest experience. It's important that we get in there, take care of this stuff, and have a seamless experience for our customers and for our guests. That's what I learned working in public aquariums.
So I've never been to San Antonio Zoo. I'm 99% sure John hasn't either. And for the people that haven't, when we first started talking, I envisioned just a giant aquatic zoo, but you've mentioned hippos, I think, before. Is there other animals? Like, is it a proper zoo, not like an aquatic-based zoo?
It's a zoo. It's mixed taxa. The aquarium's a very small portion of it. The aquarium is, the water volume that I handle is about 175,000 gallons. That's between the aquarium proper, Africa Live building, and all that other stuff. But yeah, the zoo has a big collection of birds. They do have African megafauna and giraffes, lions, and all that stuff. Aquarium is a very small part of it, but for the part that we play, we try to make sure that we're on point, and we're trying to make everything as as entertaining for the guests as possible. My aquarium was built back in 1948, so it's a very small, very pretty much ancient building, but we try our hardest to, again, upgrade the equipment, go to new technology like LED lighting and bring in UV sterilizers and all that stuff. But yeah, we try to make the best of what we got. And every time people come to visit the zoo, they say the aquarium was amazing. And that is a point of pride for me. That's a point of pride for me for everything, because even people who come to my little rinky-dinky shed right now, when they leave, they're like, it's really impressive what you did, what you have, and they can't wait to see what it is in the future.
Nice, cool. John's just put a link to the zoo's website. And telling everyone to go visit it. You would think that I would have done that prior to this, but clearly I didn't. So, what displays are you looking after at the zoo? Like, how many are you dealing with? What are their themes? All that kind of stuff. I'm just trying to get a wee picture of what's going on there before I have a look at the website later today.
So, like I said, the zoo is my full-time job, but the themes that they have going on there, all our tanks have a different theme. So there's Indian Ocean, there's Australia that has the star fly river turtle in there. We have our South American exhibit that has our stingrays. Of course, Africa Live has all the has the African cichlids, have the oddballs, or ropefish, butterfly fish, stuff like that. So yeah, it's a cool, unique experience. We work with some species that are actually extinct in the wild, and I actually have some of those fish of my own. So let's talk about those. The two species of fish that I have that are extinct in the wild are both pupfish. So I'm going to get technical here, but there's the Longi dorsalis, and then there's the Veronicae. And they're part of a program where we're in a group full of pupfish enthusiasts who raise these in our backyards. We try to collect as many eggs, hatch them out throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, they kind of get together and they kind of figure out where we need to send fish to other people, so we can kind of mix up genetics a little bit and just kind of make sure that there's not just one basket of one of these species, because if that person drops off the face of the planet, or that, population gets some type of pathogen and they wipe out, then they're gone. But yeah, I really like this program. One day I do hope to help repatriate these guys back into their native ranges in Mexico. But that is a long, long time away. But just keeping these fish on the planet is enough for me right now.
Cool. That sounds fantastic. Right. So what inspired you? You've mentioned earlier it was a kind of a wee moment of how can I push my career a little bit further, but what inspired you to get up and boogie with Creekwood Aquatics?
So Creekwood Aquatics started when I was on Facebook one day, and someone posted that they had giant betas available for sale. And I've always heard of giant betas. I just never seen one. So I was like, I am interested. So I sketchily emailed this person. He was like, meet me at my house. And I got to his house and the lights were all dark. And I was like, this is a really bad idea. But I met the guy. He brought me inside his house. He showed me all his giant betas. And then he showed me Daphnia magna. These little guys right here. Mm-hmm. And he put them in my hand, and I was like, this is really cool. I've never seen these alive in person. I've only ever seen frozen or freeze-dried. I didn't even know you can get them alive. He explained the process to me. So I bought the beta. I bought some Daphnia. I went home, and I tried to experiment, crashed immediately. I went back to his house, bought more, killed that one too. It took me about 4 tries, and eventually I got them going. And I only did it to feed my animals at home, but I was producing so many. I was like, I can actually sell these. And then after that, I was like, well, why am I going to stop there? So then I started producing phytoplankton. Now we produce 2 species, Tetrasalamus and Nanochloropsis. These are for marine systems. And after that, I was like, how far can I push this? So I started the LLC, and I just kept producing live foods. And I guess the true birth of it was I went to one of the local pet stores and I showed them my product. They looked at the jar, and right before I finished talking, he was like, how much? I was like, all right.
Cool, we're in business here.
So yeah, I started selling them the bottles. I got someone to make me a logo for my company. I started slapping them on the bottles. And the crazy thing was, I was like, I'm just a guy growing bugs in his backyard. Like how far can this go? And when I started doing shows and conferences, people would walk up to my booth and they would look at my logo. They're like, I know you. I've seen you. I've seen you on YouTube. I've seen you on Facebook. And I was like, I'm actually getting recognized. So and we just kept going. We kept going, and we started the Aquarius Assembled podcast. And TikTok has actually been amazing for my company too. And my wife's been telling me to get on TikTok forever. And I was like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But I decided just to release a couple pre-made videos that I had on YouTube that performed poorly on YouTube. But on TikTok, they went crazy. And then people started just subscribing. And I was like, okay, maybe I've been looking at all this wrong. But yeah, Creekwood Aquatics started with just 3 buckets in my backyard. And now it's this fish room. And we're hoping to just keep growing and growing. And eventually 3 to 4 years, maybe have a brick and mortar store and just keep going, see where it goes.
Crazy for someone who uses multiple platforms, how one piece of content on one will not go well, but then on another one it goes absolutely fine.
Yeah. I'm like, YouTube, you awake? And I kept to poke it.
Yeah. Blows my mind how some things work and some things don't. Anyway, cool. We've got a couple of questions from the floor.
See that? Nah. Yeah, see, I just subscribed.
So, Macrosoma, I'm assuming that was related to the giant betta? Or have I missed something here?
No, that was before the giant betta.
Okay, cool. What species of the giant betta? Because John was also trying to work that out as well. They've only just recently made their way into New Zealand, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever heard about that. Are those the wild ones? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not good with the scientific names. I'm more of a common name guy sometimes.
And we've had someone say they remember meeting you at the expo, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good times. I've got a wee question on that as well. Do you happen, I think I might have asked you this before, but do you happen to know Josh from Pod Your Reef?
I heard about him. I know he's local to San Antonio. I think he was at one of the last events I went to, San Antonio Reef Fest. But it was just so crazy, so busy. I never had time. But yeah, one day I will reach out to him because I know he has great products. And yeah, I see them around town, and I'm kind of hoping to be on the shelf right next to him too.
Cool. So you guys you would have competing products, is that correct?
I think we have a lot of similar things. The only thing that differentiates me is I have the Daphnia magna and the Mona. But yeah, I know he does pods. I know he does phytoplankton, but that's one thing that every time I go to the shops or I meet people, people ask, when are you doing pods? And I was like, oh, I don't know. It's not really in my wheelhouse. But eventually I broke down and I said, you know what? We're going to do pods. And I got them right here. They're real small. But the one thing I learned about the pods is the more I do for them, the more upset they get. So I learned I put them in my bucket, pop my aerator in there. I feed them phytoplankton. I keep the water green. I just walk away. Just don't touch it. Just leave it alone. It does better without me.
So yeah, Josh does all my website work. That's how I know that we correlation there. And I knew that he's from the same state, and I know that your state's ginormous, but anyone that's ever from Texas, I always ask if you know each other just because it's ironic because how big it is.
Well, the aquarium community here is very tight knit, especially with a lot of the groups that are here. Like I'm part of the it's a new group. It's the San Antonio Area Aquarium Society, but I was also part of the Greater Austin Aquarium Society, GAS, and then there was the Hill Country Cichlid Club. So yeah, fish clubs in this area I noticed are very tight knit, and they all talk to each other and they all kind of work together. I mean, a lot of the fish that I brought into the shop, they're from local breeders. And I find that going to the local breeders and getting their fish is it's a lot, I can say a lot better, but it's better than going through a lot of the transshippers or a lot of the bigger places, because again, these fish are, they're bred in these facilities and they're the only fish they've been mixed in, so it kind of helps keep pathogens down too. But yeah, when I started getting stuff from bigger vendors, yeah, everything's gonna have to go through a couple-day quarantine, deworming, and all that stuff. But with the local breeders, I've been lucky so far. But funny thing is, when I first moved to Texas, I'm from New Jersey, and you could be any point in New Jersey in 3 hours, 3 hours, whatever. You're everywhere. When I got to the border of Texas, I was like, okay, when am I going to get home? It was like 12 hours. 12 hours from the border of Texas to San Antonio. I was like, this is... No, it was 8 hours. It was 8 hours, but it was still an awful drive. I was like, this state does not end. It just keeps going.
8 hours. In 8 hours, I can drive the full length of Scotland.
Yeah, I can pretty much do most of the South Island. Like, if I get stuck in traffic, it takes me 12 minutes to get home in traffic.
Before we go
in New Jersey. Yeah. Well, in New Jersey, I was spoiled because we had a supermarket every 3-5 minutes. If I wanted to go get milk, I was like, I'll be right back. I would go and I'll be home. No one even missed me. Commercials wouldn't even know by the time I got home. Here, if I want to get milk, I have to drive 30 minutes into town and come back. It's like...
Cool. So we've had a question come up that we missed earlier. So apologies to Stephen. If a home aquarist wanted to measure ORP of their tanks, there are meters that are at the $20 level and the $100 plus level, up to well over $1,000. Is there any value in the cheaper ones?
So here's what I got to say about cheap versus expensive equipment. When I try to cheap out and I try to get cheaper equipment, it only lasts me a few years, and then I got to rebuy it again. So I learned to kind of stick kind of mid-range towards the high end, because these things are built with more quality and you're going to get more bang for your buck. You're not going to be replacing them as much as you are. So even with ORP probes, I think at least here, American Marine, or I forgot the name of the company, American Marine Instruments. They make a bunch of probes, and they're affordable, and they last a long time, and they're just a good quality product. But yeah, in the aquarium hobby, when you cheap out, you're going to end up paying double later. So stick mid-range high. I don't know how you feel, but that's how I feel.
So the cheaper ones do as they're meant to. They just don't last as long as that. That's kind of what I'm getting from that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, pretty much. But the most important thing too, whether you have high end or low end equipment, is just keep it calibrated. Especially with an ORP probe, you're going to have to you need to soak it in the pH 4 and pH 7 solution. You got to add the quinhydrone that kind of simulates the 350 millivolt thing. And I say you just got to keep those probes calibrated, do it every month, and it'll last you.
Cool. Thank you for that. Can you please tell us about what your mission is and your vision for Creekwood Aquatics?
My vision and mission, my thing is I want to create these aquarium live foods, and I want them to be affordable to the average level aquarist. When I go on eBay, a lot of the times I see these products and there's a huge paywall to them. People want, $50, $40 for a small batch of Daphnia. And for me, they're not that hard to create. They're not that hard to grow. So I want to share that with the people. Also, the information. I tell people that just because you buy product from me doesn't mean our transaction is over. You can always send me an email. You can call me, and I will help you troubleshoot. I will help you grow your population. My mother, when I talked to her about this, she goes, "You're crazy. If people learn how to grow them at home, they won't buy them from you." I said, "Well, okay, I'm fine with that." My thing is, I want to make this stuff more of an entry level for the aquarist, because then the hobby grows and it continues to, do well. And I also think that the enrichment benefit to the live Daphnia is invaluable to these fish. Think about it. You can either feed a frozen bloodworm or you can feed a flake, and the fish kind of eat it and whatever, they're one and done. But when you put the live Daphnia, these things are moving and they're making the fish feel like they're actually fish, and they're chasing, they're hunting, they're eating these guys. So they're getting the mental enrichment, but they're also getting the vitamins, the minerals, and all that good stuff on the inside. So again, my thing is, I want to bring these live foods more into the mainstream, especially in the San Antonio area. And then when it comes to my fish too, I'm trying to make them where company makes money, but also we make it affordable so people can come here and actually be able to have a good time with the hobby. Like my discus are priced at $25 and $75 for large ones. And again, I could charge outrageous prices, but I also want to bring people back. I want them to come and experience this and kind of gain the love for aquariums that I have. So
I think as well, for younger fish keepers coming into the hobby, when they've got a small budget, and they normally you would look at, the lower budget fish like your mollies and live baiters and things. I think if they're stuck within that price range for too long, they'll lose interest. But if younger ones with a smaller budget can access the dwarf gouramis or the dwarf cichlids and kind of get into the more exciting fish earlier on, it's only going to continue to grow their hobby, which then grows your business, and then everybody benefits from it. So I think keeping that point, the price point down, is a good way of doing it, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important. Again, this hobby has given me so much. I was able to actually build a career off of this hobby. So I feel like this is my way of giving back to the hobby. So creating Creekwood, affordable live foods, affordable fish, and also a good customer experience is what's important to me. That's our mission.
Absolutely.
I absolutely love your inspiration behind knowledge transfer. I think finally we've begun breaking down the doors of the old boys club of I know this, I'm not going to tell you, work it out, to a point where I know this, you've asked me a question, absolutely, I'm going to help you with that so you have success as well. And I think that's a massive thing for the hobby itself moving forward. And there's more and more people taking that approach now, obviously including yourself, which I think is just a phenomenal mindset for the hobby itself and the fish keeping public.
So here's another thing about this. So again, I'm close to San Antonio, right? I tell people we have a city of over 1 million people here, right? There's enough business to go around. So like it doesn't have to be this whole this is mine. There's enough. And then of course with the online side of it, your reach goes out even further. So again, it's about the customer service, about getting people good fish, good information, good food. And I think that will rise to the top as opposed to just saying, this is mine.
We've had a couple of comments. So we'll just bring up what Zen has said. Creekwood Aquatics is already on the Fish Fam link with his website and channel info. If anyone wants to find him on there, you can check out his site. So if people are looking to find some more information, more stuff about you, and we'll work backwards here. Gina said, Live Daphnia has been core to working with wild beetles for her. There are many species people could be keeping that are endangered that need live food, so making this accessible to the average aquarist is great. And that leads on to a question that Helen has asked. Do you have any tricks for keeping Daphnia going? Mine tend to do well for a while and then the colony collapses. So let's pick your brain about Daphnia. Let's go from 0 or 1 Daphnia to a gazillion of them, if you can help us.
So the cool thing is I actually do have a couple TikTok videos and a couple YouTube shorts. How fast can I grow Daphne outside? And the whole premise of the video was I just took aquarium water from one of my ponds and I set it on a table and I put about 15 Daphne in there. And that water got real green, real funky. And I just said, we're going to come back every day and we're going to check on this. And every day there was population growth, because the cool thing about the Daphne is that they can reproduce either sexually or asexually. So every day they have about 6 to 8 eggs in their body. And once they get a 16-hour light cycle, they go through a molt. And when they molt, those cysts pop out, those cysts pop up, and they're baby Daphnia. And within a week, they're adults. They have 6 more in them, and it's just exponential growth. But the trick is start off with a good water source. And when I say good water source, use existing aquarium water or your pond water. The other thing is you can either feed a dry food like this is Anthony's Organic Chlorella. I got this from Amazon, or you can go to Whole Foods or any type of health food market and get yourself either a spirulina powder or a cholera powder. The trick is not to overfeed. So I basically put enough in the water where the water turns slightly green, and I leave it there. I come back in 2 days. Once the water is crystal clear, I add more. The other thing I do is I produce my own green water. So it's just chlorella in a live form, and I pour enough of this where that water, again, stays green. A lot of people like to use yeast because yeast is really cheap, but it doesn't have the nutritional value that the Daphnia or your fish need. But also yeast is a living organism, so it kind of overpopulates. It pulls the oxygen from the water. It raises the CO2. And when I used to feed a lot of yeast, I started noticing that the Daphnia was starting to turn opaque. They're trying to turn white. They were trying to lose energy. And then next day I went, they were all gone. So I learned not to feed yeast, feed less, good source of water, and always split your culture. So if you have a good week where you produce thousands of Daphnia, split it into 2. And if you have another good week where you produce 2,000 Daphnia, keep splitting it, set up small containers, be like me, and forget them and leave them on a shelf. And then when you run into trouble, you're like, oh, and you grab them and you're able to start. I've restarted my Daphnia cultures from like 5 Daphnia before.
Wow.
But that's the important part. Always split your cultures and always have a backup for your backup. Because again, if they crash, for me it's a pain in the butt to go online and try to order from one of these guys. They're going to charge me $50 plus shipping. I'd rather try to keep them here. And the other cool thing is backup to a backup. I have all my local fish stores in San Antonio. So if I ever do run into trouble, I call them real fast. I say, hey, you still got my Daphne in stock? They're like, yeah. I say, hold on to that. And I go there and I pick it up and I restart it again.
What size containers are you culturing in? Are they just little jars all the way through, or you've got like a big master culture that you're working from?
So I started using 5-gallon buckets from Home Depot. It's a hardware store here. Once I got the hang of it, I started buying 40-gallon preform like horse watering troughs, and I have those set up along my backyard, along the sidewall over here. And yeah, there's I'm gonna say millions of Daphne out there, but yeah, the more comfortable I got, the bigger and bigger I expanded these cultures because I knew I can handle it and it wasn't going to get over my head. It is very hot here in Texas, so when I have to work out there, it is brutal. The sun like makes you delirious, but I know I got to get through all these water changes. I give my Daphnia 100% water change every week because, again, they are heavy consumers of nutrients. They do produce a lot of waste, and if you let it sit for too long, the whole thing will crash. So again, weekly water changes, and I do it to the best of my ability when I can, and when the sun isn't trying to kill me in Texas, which is pretty much like 10 months out of the year.
Temperature-wise, we've had someone ask what temperature ranges do Daphnia need before they crash.
So
how does that range work for them?
Daphnia can survive into a range from. So again, forgive me. I'm in America. All right, we're gonna say things wrong. But 40 degrees, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and they do fine up into like 86. Sometimes I'm not. I'll just say 86. But what I do to combat the heat, because the heat will kill them, is I put them in a spot where they get morning sun, and then when the sun hits a certain point, the trees provide shade, and it keeps that water from getting overly hot and kind of boiling. I'm not trying to make a shrimp boil here, but turn that off. But yeah, the key is put them in a spot where they're going to get light, but get them enough shade where they're not going to boil. Sometimes I even put pieces of plywood over 50% of the pond, just so that if the animals do get too hot, they can migrate towards the shade and cool down. So again, just like I provide the enrichment and the shelter and the stuff for my fish, I do the same for my Daphnia, because they're a living animal and they do deserve respect and love and care.
Do you have any filtration or any air running through them, water movement, that sort of stuff? How does that side of it work for you?
So that is a point of contention when it comes to people who breed Daphnia. Some people swear by sponge filters or some type of mechanical filtration or aeration. I just leave it as a stagnant pond. What happens is when you introduce air bubbles to Daphnia, they get little micro bubbles trapped in their carapace, in their shell, and they'll float up to the surface of the water, and they kind of get stuck there. So they can't eat, they can't swim, and they kind of just get hit by the sun and they end up passing that way. So I just learned this stagnant water, not stagnant, but just like keep the water still. Again, provide them, enough light, but not excessive sun, and they do just fine. But yeah, there's some guys who just love to put small airlines in there, just kind of bubble it up. That works for them, but it doesn't work for me. But everyone needs to find their own way.
Very cool. Brian has just come out and said, so translated into real temperatures, it's between 8 degrees and 26 degrees for the that aren't working on the Freedom units. Cool. I've got a couple more questions related to Daphnia, because this is always a topic that people want to know about. You said the magic light hour was 16 hours a day.
Yes.
Over that, do things go wrong? Is that just the magic will populate? Do they need that? How does the light cycle work for them?
It's what they need that tells their brain it's time to molt. Because Daphnia are very seasonal animals, and in the wintertime is when they start, well, at least in the northern hemisphere. In the wintertime, that's when they tend to, there's less daylight, and they tend to just to kind of slow down. They start to go into kind of a brumation, and that's when they go sexual. So when the temperatures go down, there's less light. They know that it's time to start reproducing and creating the next generation. So when they mate, they create these little egg packets, and they drop those on the floor, and they kind of just remain dormant for the winter time. And then in the spring or summer, when conditions are right, those cysts will start to hatch, and then there's a new generation of Daphnia. So in order to keep them going, in order to trick them, we give them the 16-hour light cycle. In the wintertime, when things start to, again, dim down, I put artificial light on them just so that I can still trick their brain to tell them, hey, it's okay, let's keep producing cysts.
Cool. And my last question on Daphnia at this stage is, how can you start a culture if you don't have any starter cultures to start with? Is there a way of starting from water to kind of getting them to accumulate? Is there a way of making that work naturally?
So there are some people. Daphnia are from Russia originally, but they kind of became invasive. So you can actually find them in the States, or you can find them around everywhere. The issue is, if you're going to wild harvest these guys, you're going to have to understand that you can bring home something you don't necessarily want to bring home with you, whether it be like dragonfly larvae or any type of pathogen, stuff like that. So I tend to, and again, this is my company. I say get yourself a starter from a clean source, from a reliable source, and then grow up from there. Again, you can wild collect these, but there is a chance you're going to bring home something nasty, and you don't want to introduce that stuff to your aquariums. Because my product gets sold in local pet shops and I sell online, I try to make sure that these bugs are as clean as possible, and there's no other hitchhikers that are coming in those bottles to your home.
So could you pick up a bag of Daphnia when you're at your local fish shop and use that to start a culture?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And that's what I tell people here in San Antonio too. Like, you get the reason why I mark my product so cheap, and my bottles are $15 for 300 count Daphnia. I tell people I consider myself like a local baker, right? Everyone has the ability to bake their own bread. They don't want to. They want to pay the baker to do it. So again, if I make my product in a price range where it's affordable for you just to go to the store and buy your Daphnia and feed them out for the week, I'll bake them. I'll bake the bread for you. It's fine. But again, if you want to take that step, if you want to grow, I have the information. People can email me. I will send them pretty much a breakdown of how to keep them, how to feed them out. You can keep them in your refrigerator. Again, 40 degrees. So you just pop them on the top shelf, and that kind of puts them into a hibernation. So they'll kind of slow down, and that'll give you more time to feed these things out. But I want to give people options. Either you want to grow them at home or you want to buy them from me. Those are your options, and they're both viable.
Cool. That's a great analogy. People go to bakers despite the fact people can bake bread. I can't bake bread, but I understand where you're coming from. That's fantastic. The other question I had is, how do you count 300 Daphnia?
All right. Everyone asks me that. Like, how do I know there's 300 in there? That's because when I first started this company, I pulled each Daphnia out and I put them in a small net, and I saw that when it got to the size of a quarter, that was 300. So then I started training my brain. I scoop, I swirl them around, I see that little quarter shape, I go, there it is, 300, pop them in. But even if I'm wrong, even if there's a slightest possibility, which I'm wrong, which I never am, the Daphnia, again, have those cysts inside their bodies, right? So while they're in that container, they're going to give birth. So imagine those 300 Daphnia are going to give birth to 6 babies each. There's going to be way more than 300 Daphnia in that container. So, like, I'm safe. And you're
welcome.
Thank you very much for that rundown. That is, that was phenomenal, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that learned some stuff about that. And hopefully, we've ticked a few boxes for some people that had a few questions regarding Daphnia. So, thank you so much.
I see one more question that I do want to answer right here. Sorry. Someone's asking, how does it differ between Mona?
Yep, that's what we're bringing up now. So,
okay. Sorry.
Cool. So Steve from Premier Aquatics questions about Mona. I've never cultured this, but cultured Daphnia and caught it wild. How does the culture differ between the two of them?
So I'm going to show you size comparison. So there's Daphnia magna right here, and this is the Mona. You can see they're much smaller.
Wow.
Yeah, they are much smaller. They are hardier than the Daphnia magna. They can take a lot more wider ranges of temperature and water quality and all that stuff. Their only drawback is that because they're so small, they require more energy. They require more food. So I can ship Daphnia across the country in just filtered water, and they'll do absolutely fine. But I have to ship the Mona in green water. I have to provide them a food source, because even in 3 days, they'll run out of energy, and then you'll just get a stinky bottle from Creekwood Aquatics. Happy with. So that is the main difference. The Mona are smaller. They reproduce way faster, but they require more energy to keep their engine running. That is their main difference. But they each have their own specific needs. Like I have some baby rice fish growing in a small container over there. They're really small, so the Mona are small already. Their babies are even smaller, and it's perfect for small fry. A lot of people like to use Napoli or baby brine shrimp, but sometimes they're too big for the mouths of some of these fish. Like when I bred betas, I started off with the Mona. Actually, I started off with Rota first, and then Mona, and then I graduated them onto Daphnia. But yeah, it all depends on what you're trying to do. And I lost my train of thought, but that's being a fish nerd.
You're obviously still quite a young fledgling business. So what are some of the challenges that you've experienced so far when starting up Creekwood Aquatics, and how have you managed to overcome them so far?
The challenge is learning not to get over my head. So I started this company with $300. I basically had $300 left after I went grocery shopping, and I was like, I'm going to do this. So I bought some jars, I bought some pumps, and I brought this stuff. But it's hard because sometimes when you make some money, you're like, what else can I get? What else can I expand? You got to learn sometimes that you got to hold off, and you have to build like a nice little safety, and then you can continue to expand and grow and do all this stuff. Even with a lot of the fish I have here, I made sure that I could afford them and that I wasn't going to go into an extreme amount of debt just to hold on to these fish. Even with this building, I bought this shed just to store some boxes, and when I decided to do the fish room, I was like, okay, so this shed's almost paid off. Like I'm not building a new one. All these tanks here, I already had. I've been collecting these tanks for years. So it's like, so it's not like the prettiest setup, but it's what I got and it's what works. And again, as I start to grow and I start to make more money and the business becomes more successful, then I can start reinvesting that and getting better quality tanks and lighting and all that stuff. But yeah, the thing when you start the business, do not get ahead of yourself. Don't go to the bank and be like, hey, give me $1 million loan. I'm going to open this amazing pet store, because it's not going to work that way. You got to start small and you got to work your way up. You got to build your reputation. You got to get the trust of the people in your area, and then you have a chance. And that's what I'm learning.
Cool. I feel like you directed that comment straight at me. Not buying all the shiny things just because they're shiny. I understand. Cool. So we've had a couple more questions. Steve's asked, this is brilliant. Thank you. Mona babies smaller than newly hatched Artemia, and how do they compare to Infusoria?
Oh, Infusoria. I produce Infusoria, but I don't sell that to the public because it's gross and it's stinky. But yeah, the Mona, I think there's more protein and there's just more nutrients in them, because like when we feed out the Artemia, the baby brine, we're basically whatever yolk that's attached to them, that's the nutrients you're feeding out to your fish. So depending on when you feed that Napoli out to your fish, depends on how nutritious they are. At least with the Mona, they're constantly eating, they're constantly storing that energy, so that transfers to the fish. The Infusoria, that's good for really small stuff like beta fry. But the way I make that is I just take existing aquarium water. I take like spinach and I put that in the microwave and I boil it and I blanch it. And then I strain out the spinach and I put that into my existing jar of aquarium water. I put that in the windowsill and I wait for that kind of milky kind of material to kind of build up on top. And then I just take a pipette and I feed that out to my baby fish. But it's really stinky and I don't want to sell that to general public.
Yeah. Not that pleasant whatsoever. We've had another question up here. Zim would like to know, do you have any plans to go to any upcoming aquatic events?
I try to do as many aquatic events as I can. So I always kind of give myself a goal. And my first year in operation, I went to 3 shows. And I told myself, that this year I'm going to do a total of 6. So I already did 2 shows locally for the San Antonio Area Aquarium Society. That's the event is held at Water Garden Gems in Marion, Texas. There's another event coming up in Houston, the Aquarium Nation show. And I'm trying to do a couple other smaller ones. Like I know Austin used to do a couple of the shows, but they kind of dropped off. But yeah, anytime I get a chance to go and promote my company, that's where I am. Even if I don't make money at that event, the fact that people see me, they get to talk to me, they get to see my product, they get to hold it in their hands, and they go home knowing like, you know, there's a website, there's a YouTube, there's a TikTok, there's whatever. Eventually they'll come back. But again, sometimes just being visible and out front is worth it. So yeah, I'm trying to do as many shows as possible. I'm trying to figure out when the next one is coming up. I know I missed the International Beta Congress in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but maybe next year. Cool. But there are some shows in Dallas that I'm going to try to go to. I just got to take a road trip.
Zin has asked, when you say a jar in the window, is there a top on it? Because she has cats. And is there any aeration or that prevent it from growing and getting stinky as it should?
Oh, for the infusoria? Yeah, I just leave them open top. And I just put them in a way where it's not going to get in the way of my wife. Because one time I did leave it in her reach and she knocked it over on herself and she was not happy with me.
I understand. Cool. I've just asked the people watching if there's any other sort of live food cultures that they want to know about. That we'll bring it up because it feels I am geeking out over it. So I'm assuming everybody else is as well. So if we've got some more things coming through, we'll ask some more questions about some different cultures as we get them.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to pull, I pulled a lot of my products, but I didn't even pull my marine rotifers. Well, they're not marine rotifers, but they're brackish water. They're a really small microscopic bug, and they do well from anywhere from 5 parts per thousand up to, I think, 60 parts per thousand. So that's like even beyond like reefing. These things are real tough. But I know I said parts per thousand, but I'm going to go back to regular speak and use specific gravity. But the L-type rotifers that I produce, they breed best when you keep them at 1.015 to 1.019. Is their breeding range. Anything higher, they kind of stop. Anything lower, they stop. So there's a sweet spot for them. that's it. And salinity. Salinity. The cool thing about them is that I kind of upcycle them. So I produce my phytoplankton, I feed the phytoplankton to my rotifers, and then I feed the rotifers to my copepods. So it's kind of transferring again that energy to each one of my cultures. But yeah, so sometimes it hurts when I have to feed my my rotifers. I'm like, well, there's $15. Bloop, 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 bloop. Hope I make it back.
We have had a question. Have you got any experience with whiteworms?
No, not yet. I'm part of another Facebook group called what's it called? It's like the Live Food Culturing Facebook group. And I know a lot of them do the white worms. They do the grindle. I think they're the same thing. I do have vinegar eels inside that I've been trying to experiment with. But I keep telling people that I keep adding a new live food product to my company every quarter. So that's one of my goals too, is that every 3 months, I want to try something else to continue expanding my line of live food products. But I also have to be realistic and know that I'm one guy, and there's only so much overtime I can do.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of questions. Which way do we want to start this, John? Go with Zen and then Hal and then Zen.
I was going to go with outside and aquatics, just above Zen.
Oh, okay. Cool.
That one?
All right, we'll go with that. I didn't even see that one. Hands off. You do it. Cool.
Have you heard of APR, artificial protein rotifers? And Do you know what they are? Anything about them?
But I've never heard of anything about that. I know there's a few companies that make like referoids and a couple other stuff. I mean, no product is better or worse than any other product. It's what works for you. So if you want to feed live foods for your aquarium, the benefit is that they live in the tank. They won't spoil. They won't decompose somewhere. But again, is there some people who just want to mix their referoids or whatever, Cyclops, whatever, and just kind of dump it in their tanks? And it's in this hobby, there's 1,000 ways to do the same thing right. There's also 1,000 ways to do it wrong. It's what works for you. That's what I think.
Zen would like to know, culture any copepods or mycids, specifically asking about seahorse live foods, as those are hard to find.
So, yeah, the copepods. I mean, so at my current job, we breed the potbelly seahorse. We do feed them a lot of baby brine. It's a cheap food source. It's a good food source for them. There are copepods that just kind of grow as a byproduct in that system, and I know they kind of graze on those throughout the day. Mysis shrimp, I know that there's one guy that I met who cultures mysis shrimp. He said the biggest issue with them is that they're cannibalistic, so they kind of eat each other. But I forgot how he does it. But yeah, for seahorses, I would just start the babies off on Artemia, the baby brine, grow them up, try to wean them onto frozen foods, and just kind of maintain it that way. But I think trying to maintain a culture of mysis or pods, I think with seahorses, as much as they eat, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. And if the culture crashes, then you're in a bad position. So I think, yeah, start off with live, wean them on the frozen, and then just kind of keep them going that way. But we feed our seahorses about 3 times a day because they don't have a very efficient digestive tract. So like whatever goes in comes right out, and we just got to keep feeding them.
Cool. Someone has mentioned, as you said, that they're carnivorous and pretty difficult to set up with continuous culture for, and that they have seen people do it with a long tank with different grade meshes separating them in a stream style flow, which makes logical sense when you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Cool.
But also extremely difficult. Who has like the time? I barely have time to do water changes.
Yep. Hide. There we go. And Helen has said, how do you start / grow a phytoplankton?
The phytoplankton, yeah. So you're going to start off with a clean culture, and you're going to pick your species, whether it's Tetrasalmus or Nanochloropsis. Everyone asks me what the difference is, and I say, honestly, I don't know, but I'll find the answer. But yeah, start with a clean culture. I like to culture my phytoplankton in glass jars. I feel like the glass is just easier to clean, easier to sanitize. When I use plastic, every time I scrub them out, I would leave little micro scratches, and I would realize after I was done culturing, I would still see green kind of etching in that plastic. And then when I started my next culture, it would crash because you got to imagine the phytoplankton, they must be delicious. I don't know. But everybody wants to eat them. Even the bacteria in the jar want to eat them. So I use the glass containers because I can dip them in bleach and I can really sanitize them, dry them. I mix my seawater, again, to salinity 1.018. I add my phytoplankton culture, and then I use an F2 fertilizer that I got from Amazon. The brand I use is from Montana of Mercer. They have a fertilizer that's already pre-mixed, so you just shake it up and then you put it in. I know there's other companies like Pentair Aquatic Eco. They're here in the States. They make a part A and part B fertilizer. You mix them together in equal ratios. And I use 5 milliliters of fertilizer per 1 gallon of culture. I buy basically plant grow lights that are heavy on the red and white spectrum because that's better for photosynthesis. I have these little cheap air pumps I got from Amazon. I know I'm going through the whole setup. I'm a big nerd. And I use a rigid airline. I do have videos on my TikTok and on my Facebook about what my setup looks like. But basically it looks like I'm just boiling green water. But I think to circle back, you can produce your own phytoplankton. Just make sure that every piece of equipment that you're using that touches the water is sanitized, even your hands. I clean my hands all the way down to my elbow because like the slightest bit of sweat or dirt that falls into that culture is going to turn yellow and it's going to crash immediately.
Wow.
And some of the biggest heartbreaks that I've ever had was getting closer to one of the reef shows that I was at. I was so worried and I was stressed out and I was like, am I going to have enough phytoplankton to fill the need, this, that, blah. So I got a little careless and I introduced some type of contaminant to my phytocultures. In 3 days, the whole line, all 12 bottles, all 12 gallons just went to nothing. And I was like, I am done. I am done. I already bought my booth. Like I'm supposed to be there. I got about I think it was like 2 weeks to like fix this. And I had to culture it real fast. And I got there and I bottled everything up. But I was like, yeah, one careless mistake can cost you your entire culture. So I also learned to shift. So I'll culture 6 bottles on this week. And then the following week, I culture the other set. So I harvest these 6 and then I harvest the next 6 later, just so I kind of keep them alternating. So again, if I do have a massive crash, I'm not messed up. And then the other thing is I also keep a few bottles in my fridge as a backup. And what I do is once a day, I shake them up because the phytoplankton likes to settle at the bottom. And when it stays down here for too long, it'll suffocate itself and it'll die. So I just kind of shake it, keep it suspended, and it's good to go. And one of these bottles will last 30 days in your refrigerator.
Really?
That's
wow.
the thing about live phytoplankton.
Sure. I love the fact that you've got all these cultures just hanging around you. You just and sort of show me as you're talking.
I got little squirrel holes everywhere full of stuff.
Helen's asked, can you use standard marine salt for them?
Yes, you can. And so what I do with my product is I want to have the best product. So I use Fritz RPM, the Reef Pro Salt. I use it because I know the company. They're local to Texas. And yeah, that's the way I started. Well, I didn't start with that. I started with Instant Ocean. I started with just the regular orange box Instant Ocean salt. And then I moved on to Reef Crystals. And then after Reef Crystals, I decided to use the Fritz salt because I was like, you know what? Let's make this a premium product. So the salt is going to be premium salt, and you're going to get phytoplankton. And I just feel like it's a better product. But either way, the salt doesn't matter. Just get it to the right salinity and just have at it.
Cool. Has there been any technological advances that has helped you with your culturing of your live specimens, or is it kind of a relatively basic move, if that makes sense?
The biggest thing was the lighting. So once the LED lighting for like the grow lights, that cost started coming down. I mean, I bought a nice, I believe it was like a 53 or 54 watt 12-inch light from Home Depot. I got it for about $60, I believe. And yeah, like once I got a really good LED light, and I give these guys about a 16-hour light cycle. So my dogs wake up, they wake up every morning to these lights just going boom, and then like they start barking, and then that light doesn't go off to around like 10 o'clock at night. Once the LED light technology kind of came down in price and more affordable, and you get the right spectrum, that kind of helped me out there. Everything else is just I bought these cheap they're powerful pumps from Amazon. They cost me about $34. The Paul Fly air pumps. But yeah, the cost to start it wasn't terrible. That's why I said I started this company with $300, and I was able to invest that in Daphnia cultures and phytoplankton and rotifers, and it kind of going. But like on a crazy scale, a normal person isn't going to be crazy and have 12 bottles of green water just boiling in their living room.
Probably not. No. Are you happy to continue to talk about live food cultures, or do you want to move on to
talk about whatever you want?
The fish side of what you're doing and that sort of stuff?
I say I'll go whichever way you guys want to talk. I love talking about fish, and I do this all day.
Cool. Okay, let's we'll just maybe swap paths for a little bit. If there's more live cultures that people want to know about, again, feel free to drop them into the comments. We can happily come back to that. But let's go towards the fish side of it. What fish are you currently stocking, spawning, being involved with for both your personal self as well as your the Creekwood Aquatics?
So again, breeding. I used to do a lot of breeding before Creekwood Aquatics. That's actually where all these tanks came from. They were set up in my old apartment, and my wife was like, "How many fish tanks do you think you can fit in here?" And I was like, "Well, do we need the dining room table? Like, I could fit more if we just get rid of the table." Yeah, I was breeding rainbows back in the day. I was breeding angelfish. I was breeding a bunch of Gardner Achilles, beta, stuff like that. And then once the fish room opened, I decided to pull back from the breeding because I wanted to focus more on the business, but also my relationships with the local breeders are very important to me. So if I can buy fish from them and support them in their hobby, and they can produce me good quality fish, I can sell those. I think that relationship is worth, pursuing. So a lot of the stuff in my room currently are from the local breeders, from the African cichlids to the rice fish, to the fancy guppies. My friend Matt, really great guy. He got me the black skirt tetras over here. My friend Frank, he got me my fancy plecos. So he got my honeycombs, my super reds. What else he got me? Albinos. I got lemon blue eyes over here. And then my discus breeder. I'm actually sold out. I have 3 more discus. I get about 12 discus every week, and by the end of the week, they're already gone. So I have to actually, after this, I have to drive and go talk to him. But yeah, like I said, once I opened the fish room, my whole breeding kind of went down again. Just focus on the local breeders.
Yeah.
What was the part 2 of that?
I can't remember. Not sure.
My memory's terrible.
But I can go with another question. Is there a specific niche of fish that you're kind of working in or towards? Because that's quite an eclectic mix of fish, or just an overall all-round fish store, so to speak, if that makes sense. You know where I'm kind of going with that?
Yeah, so I think like the specialty, the high-end product that I have right now are the discus. They're very popular. The breeder that I deal with, he kind of already acclimates them to the water of this area. So we don't have to go crazy trying to do the RO and chasing the perfect pH, because they're already adjusted to the higher pHs in Texas. So those are fish that I'm always going to carry in the shop because they're beautiful. They move. People like them, and actually draws people in. And the one thing that I noticed too is that people will schedule appointments to come look at the discus, and while they're looking at the discus, while I'm bagging them up, they start looking over there, and they're like, "What are those?" I'm like, "Well," I go, "Those are platinum guppies, Dumbo platinums." They're like, "I'll take 3 of those." I'm like, "Cool, fine." But I kind of want the shop to kind of change. I don't want to keep the same stuff and keep pushing that over and over again because I don't want to like saturate the market or people's aquariums. So I kind of want to keep things moving. And as this room expands, I do want to carry more exotic stuff. Like I'm a big fan of African arowana, but I know they grow big. It's a very specialty fish. They're filter feeders, and it's hard to explain to people that they don't just eat from the water column. You kind of got to get their food into the sand. They kind of sift that out. I'm a big fan of arowana too, just regular like silvers, jardinis. I do want to carry those more exotic things, but I need more space right now in this aquarium. I think when it's all said and done, there's going to be at least, I think there was going to be 1,000 gallons in here, if I did my math right. But again, as this company becomes more successful, as it grows bigger, and I start to get more volume of water, I do want to carry more exotic, more cool things. But I'm realistic. I know that a lot of that stuff isn't going to sell in the San Antonio area. That's where the website comes through, and I can actually branch out and kind of spread the love that way. But again, too, I don't want my shop to be like intimidating. So I want people to know, like, you can come here and you can find your discus, you can find your African cichlids, but you're also going to find neon tetras, you're going to find mollies, you're going to find this. So I want it to be a fun mix for everybody. So for all experience levels, come here, learn about the fish hobby, and then you can grow from here. The one thing I noticed about like the big box pet stores is that when I worked there back in like 2006, 2007, around that time, they had some really cool fish. But as the stores grew bigger, they started just doing more bread and butter stuff. So then I started seeing the same libido chromis. I started seeing common plecos, the goldfish, whatever. And everything just kind of just became a generic, just like we have the fish. And that's not the fun part of the hobby. You know, the big box stores, I think they do have a place in our community, and it's more of an entry level, like come here, buy a 10-gallon starter kit, buy a couple neons, buy a couple platies, you go home. But then the people who are really passionate about this about this hobby or career, they're going to say, okay, I've done this. What else can I do? So they go online, they try to find like local mom and pop shops, and then that's where the hobby truly grows, because then you can get more like Madagascan cichlids, or you can get, more Africans, or some of the bigger South American stuff, or you know what I mean? So like, yeah, there's entry level and then just kind of build up.
Yeah, totally makes sense. You're fairly fresh as far as open times are, correct? Like the last 6 weeks or so, is that right?
Well, I repeat that.
You're fairly your doors only opened about 6 or so weeks ago. Is that about right?
Yes. I opened back in June. I opened, I think, like June 20th when I came back from a trip from New Jersey to visit my daughter. It was a really scary time because I was actively building the room. Like I just finished putting up the sheet. I insulated the walls, added the sheetrock, and I was painting and I was building stands. And I do have some like remnants, like videos on YouTube and TikTok of like this place in shambles. And my wife kept telling me, she goes, "You should wait. I don't think you're ready. You should wait." And I got to the point where I was like, I don't think I'll ever be ready unless I actually do this. Yeah. So she was like, "All right, good luck." So I posted on Facebook, like, Creekwood Aquatics will be open these 2 days, Sundays and Mondays. And I spent that whole night the night before. I was out here till 3 a.m, clearing stuff, just opening up the pathways, making sure all the tanks were filled and this and that. And it was hectic. And then that morning I woke up, drank my coffee, and I was like, it's showtime. And then people started showing up.
Wow.
And I was like, ooh.
It's a very valid saying that the best time to start anything was yesterday and the next best time is now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will never be ready. If you're waiting for the perfect opportunity, it's already passed. Just get out and do it. Yeah. We have had a question. Have we talked about blackworm cultures? There's a big gap in that supply, and I think getting more smaller sellers instead of 2 or 3 farms would help with supply chain issues, dispersed supply. Do you deal with blackworms?
So I've tried blackworms on a couple of occasions. It is very hard to come by them. The pet shops in my area maybe have them like every few months, and once they come in, they sell out like immediately. And then there's such a demand that it just takes time for these products to come back. The problem with the blackworms is that they're very specialized. They like to be kept cooler. They don't like to be kept in deep water pools. They don't sexually reproduce, so you actually have to actively chop them up and break them up and then segment them, and then they kind of regenerate. And I've seen that happen a couple times, but it's just a hard culture to keep going. And my hat's off to anyone who actually manages to do it or set it up and has luck. But it is, for me at least, it's very technical. It's very time consuming. And the growth rate on them is so slow that at this moment, I don't think it's worth pursuing yet, especially when there's other cultures that I can learn and I can master and I can get out into the public and sell and kind of fund future projects. I know there's a couple guys in town that want to build like a large scale blackworm factory, but the issue is, how do you keep them cool in this Texas climate? How do you do it outside? I know after like the world changed, like, yeah, that supply just like dropped, because even at the zoo we were getting huge sacks. We're getting like 5-pound bags of just pure blackworms, and then after the world changed, like it went down to nothing. So then we as a zoo had to kind of pivot and kind of figure out like, what are other foods. That's actually one thing that I heard when I went to the convention in Houston, is that a lot of the amphibian breeders, they're trying to pivot because they were so focused on like the blackworms and stuff, that now that supply has kind of dwindled, it is affecting how many animals they can breed. So they are looking at Daphnia as like, can this help bridge the gap until that supply chain is fixed? And who knows? But yeah, cool. Blackworms are tough. Good luck to you if you tried it. I don't have any advice.
Enough.
I feel like at this point, because we've had a lot of conversations about live food, is there any cultures that you're currently used or doing that we haven't talked about yet? That might be the easiest way to continue this, keep going with this. And what are the future plans for the next lot of attempts or things you're going to try and culture?
Like I said, the only animal that I didn't speak about is the rotifers. They're in a bucket behind me. But again, that's something that I just mix my salt water, add my culture in, feed them the phytoplankton, and once a week, I basically pull my air lines out. I kind of let all the rotifer shells and cysts and all the stuff that, the organics kind of sink to the bottom, and then I just pour off the top layer, and I leave about 2 inches of that nasty water, and I just kind of use that somewhere else. But yeah, the thing about rotifers is they can go from 1 to 1 million, over a week. Their life cycle is about 7 days, so there is a lot of cast shells and bodies and stuff like that will build up organics, and if you don't clean them, will wipe out that entire culture. It's happened to me on a few occasions. So yeah, I just try to keep that culture as clean as possible. I keep splitting it, and then I just throw off the excess. Future projects, again, I said I have the vinegar eels. They're on top of my refrigerator. They actually been there for the last 2 months, and I forgot about them until my wife reminded me. She goes, "You going to do something with that?" And I was like, "Yes."
If you can about that, you can leave them for as long as you like.
Yeah, but I was like, they're fine. There's an apple in there. They're eating that. They're fine. But yeah, I think vinegar eels will be one of my next projects. I know someone mentioned white worms. That's something that I will look into too. I know that I'm probably gonna have to find a starter culture to start that, and then other than that, I'm open to opinions on where to go next with the live foods. But other than live foods, again for Creekwood, it's just going to be installing more aquariums, building the marine section, having the reef section here in the center, and I have a pond that I'm planning on putting outside this building, so I can start importing koi, because koi are they're really popular in this area, especially in the early fall, spring, when people are stocking their ponds. So I want to be ready for the next season, so I can actually bring in imported koi and go that way.
Cool. So if there's anybody, now I've lost my train of thoughts. It's gone. I think it was related to future cultures. If there's anything people feel that Nelson should be trying as far as future cultures go, let him know. I'm sure you'll take on some thoughts and some stuff with that. My question was going to be, culturing live foods seems to be a very sustainable practice as long as it's done correctly. And then purchasing from local breeders also seems quite sustainable to you as well. Is sustainability a massive part of what Creekwood Aquatics is doing? Because it just gets that vibe that it's kind of happened without it happening, if that makes sense.
Sustainability is really important to me. That's why I sell all the products in these 16-ounce plastic containers. And I tell all the shopkeepers and I tell my customers, once you're done with this container, bring it back to me. Give it back to the shops. I will give the shops $1 credit per jar, because I can take that jar, clean it, sanitize it, refill it. It's ready for the next week, as opposed to just taking this jar and throwing it in the trash. Let's reuse this jar as many times as possible. Same thing with Creekwood Aquatics. Right now, because we are starting, funding's low, I am using fish bags. But one thing I learned from Absolutely Fish in New Jersey is that they will now package their fish in plastic, the pet jars, because they're safe. And they tell their customers too, buy your fish, we put them in a jar, you take them home, acclimate them, bring that jar back. And then next time you buy fish, they'll refill that jar. And then, you're on your way. So let's try to get away from the single-use plastics and kind of reuse, recycle, get them back out there. The other thing is, in Texas we're in a drought. There's no way around it. We're in a drought, and I'm in a hobby where we use oceans, of water. Like crazy amount of water. So again, what I try to do is with my outdoor ponds, when I do a water change, I collect that water, I put it in my Daphnia cultures. Once the Daphnia are done with it, I collect that water, strain all the Daphnia from it. I use that water to now irrigate the trees and the plants and all the succulents and cactuses on my property. So that water is getting reused. So it's not going down the toilet. It's not going to the municipal system. It's not getting pushed out to the ocean. It's getting put back into its environment, because all our water gets pumped up from the aquifer. We use it up the ground. I return it to the ground. So one day, eventually, it'll make its way back to the aquifer, and we kind of keep it going that way. But aquarium hobby, I think it's very important that we do things as sustainable as possible. Even when our fish get wild collected, that we're going from reputable vendors. We're doing reputable collectors, and they're not just destroying an area, stripping it of all the fish, and then just good luck, goodbye. So, like, I know things like Project Paeba, I can't pronounce it. Yeah, but yeah, that's a way where the people of that area can like harvest these fish from their local rivers. They can sell them to the pet trade. That money goes back, helps support their village. So they have a vested interest in keeping those fish there and keeping it healthy. I was at a conference where they talked about the importance of that project, but when it first started, there wasn't really like there was like no set plan. So sometimes they would harvest the fish and they would put them in buckets, and then they would just kind of sit on the dock for a couple days until like the transshippers came and picked them up. They were feeding them like rice and stuff, and eventually one of the biologists that were in the area was like, hey, we can do this better. So they showed them, like, you know, once the fish are collected, this is the proper husbandry, this is how we should be keeping them. We should be feeding them better quality foods, and then by the time the transshippers get there, they have a better product, and then it goes to the markets, and then it comes to us, and then we enjoy them and we sell them to our customers. But again, I think, again, making sure that the people that you're dealing with, that they're ethical and that they're taking care of this environment, because again, like these pupfish, once they're gone, they're gone. So
a lot. You've got brought up a lot of things here for me to want to quickly talk about after that. First of all, I'm glad that you brought up Project PR, because I can do another shameless plug that we're speaking to a representative from them in a few weeks' time, and I'm absolutely looking forward to it, because it is a organization that gets brought up by a lot of our guests. So that is awesome. I also love the fact that you found a way of reusing your water more than once throughout your system. I know, as well as probably not many people, how much water we go through and how much water I literally pour down the drain, and I have not worked out a way of stopping that. So the fact that you've got one to another, that to me is absolutely fantastic. And also the jars or buckets from a local shop, you know, bringing them back and reusing them is something that I thought about a very long time ago. And for the life of me, I just could not work out how to make it done. And bringing back a jar is just logical, and it makes sense, as opposed to a single-use plastic bag. It's, you know, you're going to come back and buy some fish off me, bring the jar back, and away we go. It's fantastic. Even little steps goes a long way.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. Right. Have you noticed any trends that have been emerging in the aquarium industry recently, particularly in the area that you're in?
So one thing that kind of popped off that blew my mind is this reemergence of fancy goldfish and guppies. I'm not trying to be an elitist, but like, I was never a fan of goldfish. Like, I knew they had their place in the hobby, but I just didn't get it. They're kind of derpy and they're kind of weird. And yeah, I just noticed like people are now into their ranchus or into their Ryukins and stuff like that. So it's something that I have been bringing into the shop, and they sell out like almost immediately. And then the fancy guppies. I don't know what it is, but they keep creating more strains. They keep getting crazier, and people just gobble them up. And yeah, it's weird. I mean, I know a few years ago it was African cichlids. It was all about African cichlids. I was one of these silly people when the red dragons first came out, and there was only fry like this big in the shops for $50. I was like, I'll take 3 of them.
We've all been there.
Yeah, and then rice fish. For some reason, the Miyuki, the blue rice fish. For some reason, my friend Matt, he breeds them, he produces them, but for some reason, wasn't even on my radar of fish that people were interested in. And then I found out there's just this huge market for these rice fish, and I was like, this blew my mind, because it's a thing that's like that big. But they're really easy to reproduce. Keep them in big groups. They're beautiful. They're actually fantastic, and actually are starting to become one of my favorite fish. There's a lot of movement in there. But yeah, it's just weird. But yeah, the aquarium hobby, it's just reciprocal. So it'll be rainbows again, and then it'll just kind of recycle back. But yeah, right now the hot thing that I see in this area are fancy goldfish, fancy guppies, and now the rice fish are just like popping up there.
Do you think, for a lack of a better term, that fish influences play a part in what becomes popular and what isn't popular at the time?
Yes, absolutely. Because yeah, there was a YouTuber that just popped up a couple years ago who started selling the fancy goldfish, and then after that, I just noticed everybody wanted the fancy goldfish. That's all they wanted. And then like there's a lot of YouTubers that were importing guppies, and then like bam, guppies were like the new thing. So yeah, I do think that internet influencers have a lot to do with the trends right now. But I say I think it all kind of goes back to the classics. And again, African cichlids are something that I love personally, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. I just like them. I like to breed them. I like the colors. I like to differentiate. I used to be a big Malawi snob, but now I'm moving into Tanganyika because of the
cooler.
Yeah, the color, the shape of the fish. Like, oh, I forgot. Maybe you posted it, but they were like, African peacocks, the same fish, different paint job. I was like, oh,
yeah. Yeah. I think we can extend that to just Malawi cichlids, same fish, different paint job. And I'm sorry if I've offended any Malawi keepers. Also, on a wee side note, I was contemplating setting up a Malawi tank yesterday, but that's just a different conversation altogether.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun thing when I open the when I start getting more Tanganyika fish in here, because there's just some really cool stuff in those lakes. Now the Victorian stuff, I'm sorry, they all look like trout. They all look the same to me. I'm sorry.
We don't get a lot of Victorian here, so it's not too big of a deal. I think we only get 2, maybe 3 species here. So yeah, it's Malawi and Tanganyika here for us.
Yeah.
So we've had another couple of comments. Buckets for all stores with a $5 fee. Use the same bucket on return. That's a fantastic option. I know Helen a little bit further down the track, so this she uses Aqua One media containers to collect fish in, and so I now said that the Aqua One veggie pellet buckets work really well as well. So there's obviously options there. If we just get a few more people getting involved in that, it's probably going to go a long way. I feed my grindleworms cat or fish food. Should I be feeding more carbs, or is that just cheaper?
Again, I have no opinion on grindleworms because I haven't done it. One day I will, and I will come back and answer that question. Again, it's okay not to know the answer, but I'll find out.
It certainly is okay not to know the answer. Oops, I'm going to hide some things here. All right, cool. What advice have you got for someone who's just starting in the aquarium hobby?
I think just find out what it is you want to do. There's so many ways you can take your aquarium hobby journey. I usually like to start off with guppies, mollies, and work your way up. I mean, it's possible, but I wouldn't recommend someone jump right into an African cichlid setup because it is a very specialty setup. You have to have higher pHs. You got to have caves. You have to make sure you can balance the aggression levels of your fish, and you kind of got to be able to read your fish's body language a lot when it comes to more of these aggressive fish. So I would start off again community, low level tetra molly stuff, and then as your experience grows and your hobby grows, then you can start looking at more of those advanced fish. But also, don't go to PetSmart and buy a 10-gallon tank and then buy the fish the same day. You're not going to have a good time. And another part. So when I was a kid and we first got our first 10-gallon tank, it came with a little VHS from Top Fin. And I watched that tape literally until the VHS broke. I could recite that entire VHS. But there was one section that was wrong, and it was about cycling your aquarium. And they were like, yes, take your aquarium home, test it for leaks, clean your gravel, fill your tank, turn your filters on, and wait a week. Once your tank is cycled, you can go to the store and buy some fish. I learned that's wrong because your cycle doesn't start until you add an ammonia source and until you add a bacteria source. So, yes, when you buy your first aquarium setup, buy yourself some type of live nitrifying bacteria. There's many companies that make it. I know API makes one, Microblip makes one. Everyone has their own strain of of nitrifying bacteria, just seed your tank. You'll thank me later. But also, again, Nelson's hot take. There are some fish that can ride a cycle. So there's some stronger fish that you can pop in with a tank that's cycling, and they can kind of ride it, and they can kind of help you get to where you need to go. But it's not going to be neon tetras. It's not going to be any type of catfish, any type of scaleless loach or whatever. But like a black skirt tetra can ride a cycle. Most African cichlids, they can ride a cycle. Just don't go crazy. Just get like one or two and just kind of let it kind of build up that way. But again, that's a Nelson hot take.
The whole topic of taking a brand new aquarium home from a shop, cycling it in whatever period of days you want to add because the filter has been running is a very interesting one. As a retail shop, just yesterday I had someone come in and say, I bought this tank and we've been cycling it for 3 weeks. The filter's been on, but they've done nothing to it, and it's come from a box store. So it's a really interesting topic because people want to go hard with this new thing that they've got, and they want to get fish as soon as they can. And then it's this period of time and this period of time, or do this or do that. It's a really intricate topic, and I don't know the answer for it. But it doesn't matter who you talk to. Everybody's got their own way, their own topic, their own thought pattern, their own product to use, their own method, and it's a real minefield when it comes to that for new people trying to start new stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Minefield, that one.
For me, like when you buy a new aquarium setup, you're also buying an aquarium test kit, and again, you're buying yourself some of those nitrifying bacterias. You're doing something, but you're testing your tank. You're gonna see that ammonia go up, and you want to see that ammonia convert itself into nitrite, and then you want to see it convert itself into nitrate. Once those first two ammonia and nitrite are gone, and your nitrate's at 10 or 20 or 40, you're good. Turkey's done at that point. But that, I think that's my biggest thing. I mean, there are some more technical techniques that came up recently. Like I know Fritz Aquatic now makes an ammonium chloride, which is NH4. It's a safer form of ammonia that you can add a small amount to your aquarium. So you can add your ammonia source, you can add your bacteria, and then you can watch that cycle. But once that cycle is complete, your tank is properly cycled. But yeah, we're not going to grab 40 fish and throw them into a 75, and you're not going to have a good time.
All right, we've got a couple of comments to go through. Rebecca has said solid gold did a lot for goldfish a little while ago. Yep, absolutely. And that's possibly where the goldfish is coming back, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Where have we gone? Fishery with domestic breeding of rift cichlids coming up on 40 years, done on the common species, okay to neutral to medium hard pH type water. I'm a little bit lost in the wordage there. I think we're asking.
I think are some of the common species okay in neutral to medium hard water?
Cool. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Nelson?
So African cichlids, you want your water to be alkaline, you want it to be hard. So I think 7.5 is on the low range. I prefer my African cichlids to be anywhere from 7.8 to around an 8. I know some of the Victorian species can go a little bit higher, but I think that's the goal you want to hit here in Texas. I mean, our aquifers, all line comes out hard automatically. But yeah, 7.5, I would start considering adding some type of buffer to bring that pH up a little bit. I mean, it'll most likely be fine, but again, I think 7, 8, 8 is where you need to be.
Yeah, I think what Alex was trying to kind of raise was that they've been domestically bred now for 40 years, and do you think that's influencing their capacity to enjoy a lower pH level? Are they more acclimated to that now that they've been domestically bred for such a long time?
I mean, I think so. I think these African cichlids are really tough. I mean, even the discus, like I said, that I get, discus should really be kept in soft water, low pH, acidic. But these guys have been bred for so long in just straight city water. I actually saw breeding at the facility, and I was like, my mind was blown because I was talking to the gentleman, and all of a sudden I just watched this discus just kind of going up the wall, laying eggs, and I see another one right behind her just fertilizing the eggs, and he goes, "Yeah, they just do that." But normally, when you try to breed a discus in harder water, it makes it harder for the sperm to penetrate the egg, so you get a really low fertilization rate. But looking at the success that these breeders have with this line, with this strain, I'm like, yeah, I think you hit something special here.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of these fish can adjust to these environments over time.
I think again, stability is more, stability in a different pH range. If it's stable and everything else is met, then it stands more of a chance of acclimating itself to that, as long as it's steady within means, obviously.
So the thing also with the pH and water quality and all that stuff, like you do have to hit certain numbers so that fish kind of hit homeostasis, so that biologically they're kind of functioning. What gives me the ick, and when I see people keep Central American and African cichlids in the same enclosure, and I'm just like, that's not right. Or when I see like a South American and an African together, I'm just like, I don't know how you're doing this, but if it works for you, it works. But for me, it's like, it's the ick. But again, to each their own.
What I'm currently experiencing is there's definitely some fish that will take a pH that are different to what they want to be. They'll be fine, they'll potentially spawn. But there's definitely some that if you're not giving them what they want, they'll live fine and they'll look fine, they'll do everything fine, but come to spawning, you'll have the issues like you're saying, too high a pH covers over the eggs too quickly, they get too hard to get fertilized. That is something I'm definitely experiencing with breeding tetras, for example. If the pH is too high and there's the hardness is too much, then it's just a struggle to do that. So there's still a massive part of that is crossing over and bordering between doable, not doable, if that kind of makes sense.
I think the important thing is research your fish before you buy them and make sure that you're putting them into the proper environment. And that's the best advice I can give. Like, don't put African cichlids in with neon tetras. They're not going to be happy.
Okay, cool. We've had a pretty robust conversation in the chat about bacterias and cycling. Like I said, everyone's got their own thoughts, their own methods, their own ideas on that. I've been trying to keep track, but I'm absolutely lost on where it's gone. So, I tried to keep track so we could bring up some of the comments and some of the conversation, but I've lost it. So if people want to continue to chat about that in the comment, we'll see if we can pick any of that up throughout it.
All out war.
Oh, good. Please be nice to each other and please behave.
It's not too bad. We did have another question from Alex, though. A separate one from the first one that he answered, that he asked, sorry. This one here. The last question is, keeping a tank with little to no plants and a pH in the 8s, does ammonia spike fairly easily, as ammonia is exponentially more toxic tenfold per point of pH? Does that make sense to me?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I haven't cycled anything or played with anything super duper high as far as having ammonia and pHs of that high. Although I'm a little worried at the moment because I'm running a tank at the moment that's got no filter because the filter shat itself on me. So I'll be doing some ammonia tests on that soon, and we'll see how we go with that. Nelson, have you got anything to contribute to that one?
The only thing is, the higher your pH, the more toxic the ammonia gets. But yeah, in a cycled aquarium, you shouldn't be seeing anything higher than 0.25 ammonia. Like if you start to go higher than that, you start to get to like 1 ppm, like you got a problem, and you should start trying to correct it, do your water changes, add your bacteria and stuff like that. Yeah. The other thing is when I used to do service clients, sometimes we'd test their nitrates, and their nitrates would be like, the thing would just go off the charts red, and it's because they haven't done water changes in so long, and they don't realize that that stuff is just building and building and building in their aquariums. And then when you do a big water change, you create a big shock, and then fish start to die off. But yeah, high ammonia, high pH. I think they're a bad combination.
Cool. How are you currently balancing between working at a public aquarium as your day job and then running your startup, Creekwood Aquatics? How is that working for you at the moment?
It is tough, and there's also a third part of that. I have to be Nelson Marcucci, the husband. So,
yeah.
So I pretty much consider it clocking into each one of my jobs. So from 7 to 4, I'm at the zoo, and then from 5:30 on to 7 o'clock, I'm Creekwood Aquatics. But also during my breaks, I'm the husband, so I go and I make dinner for my wife real quick, and then from 7 on to till we go to bed, I'm a husband. I'm a family man. So it's hard because in the beginning there wasn't a balance. So like each one of those was trying to take over the priority, and things start to suffer. Either your work starts to suffer, your business starts to suffer, or your home life starts to suffer. So it's for me, I had to find that healthy balance between work, business, and home life. And on the weekends, when I'm not, that's why the shop is only open on Sundays and Mondays from 1 to 7 o'clock. Because when the shop's not open, that's when I'm spending time with my family, spending time with my wife, and we're doing stuff around the house, and then we do business. I'm kind of hoping that as the business grows and I start to make more money, I can hire people, and then I could have them kind of step in and kind of take over some of the day-to-day, and I could, still oversee, but kind of start kind of pulling back a little bit so I can focus more on the home life.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Stuff.
What are you doing? What are you doing to engage your audience and keeping them involved in what you're doing? I know you're on several different platforms on social media. What's your kind of point of difference for people to be involved with you?
So I try to do a weekly update. I call it my fish room update. I try to do that once a week and kind of just show everybody what's new in the shop, what's going on, what are my plans for the future. I try to do a bunch of social media posts. So I try to let people know, like, hey, again, these are some of the animals that I'm carrying. These are some of the products that I have. If you have any questions, please reach out. And then a lot of the shorter TikTok videos, just because I feel like on TikTok, it's easier to engage with your audience. So I think like once they see a video that they like, they can click on your profile. They can see the rest of your stuff. They can just click, like, subscribe, and then kind of I feel like on TikTok, it's a more interactive experience. But also, I do have my Google Voice line. I have my email open. I have my chat bot on my website. So I tell people, like, you can send me a message on the website. I will try to answer it as soon as possible, at least in 2 hours. Like, sometimes I'll see the message and I put it in my head and I say, okay, I got to get back to that. I put it down. I do some stuff and then I come back to it. But I never want to leave anyone hanging. I don't want to leave anyone feel like I'm not valuing their time or their question. But yeah, it is tough. But yeah, I'm trying to engage with people as much as I can. Even when I go to events or shows, I'm out there in front of my table and I'm just talking and just engaging as many people as I can. Because that's what we need to do.
Cool.
And it's
cool.
fun.
It is fun. I totally understand just going back to a little bit, having multiple hats on, how that works and the pull between the few. Keeping aquariums can be a pretty hectic job. And Alex has brought up an option of perhaps a collective where each breeder works for a day could help you out and sell more.
It would be cool, but I don't think the federal government would be happy if I had unpaid labor walking around Creekwood Aquatics.
Yeah.
Again, not to get over my head, but yeah, I know at this point I can manage the business by myself. But again, as it grows, as it expands, it is going to require help. But hopefully, at that point, it'll be financially stable enough so I can actually bring in and pay someone fair wages to do the job.
What are some of your favorite species to work with at the moment?
African cichlids, Mabunas, Alunacara, stuff like that. They're always going to be my favorite fish to work with. I just enjoy them. There's something about them, the digging and their behaviors. For me, they're fantastic. Again, I work with the pupfish, the two species. I didn't understand what people found fascinating about them until I started working with them. And there's just something about this blank stare that these fish have. And they're really sociable to a fault. If I walk past the ponds, they all come up to the corner and they want to be fed. And that's great because I'm a human. But if I'm also a raccoon and they think the raccoon's going to give them fish flakes, the raccoon's just going to have a all-you-can-eat buffet. So yeah, they don't have like the self-preservation thing that most fish have.
Yeah.
But African cichlids, the pupfish, and then I think one of the species that I do want to keep personally myself are the baddest. There's something about the micro predator fish that I just find so fascinating. And I once had a baddest, and I put him in a shrimp tank, and I go, "What's the worst that can happen?" Killed all my shrimp. Yeah, so I was like, "Yeah, you earned the title micro predator."
Yeah. Right, Zen had a question. Or sorry, Zen has just brought something up, and I'm going to have to see if we can find the question. Is that something he knows anything about? As I have found my tap water is pretty awful. Can you please expand on that? Because I've not been able to keep track of the chat. I'm sorry, Zen. How do you balance your passion for keeping fish in aquariums, running a business, as well as working in a public aquarium? Because I know for myself, running a business, I've almost lost my hobby per se. The passion's still there, but the hobby's kind of gone. How are you balancing that for you and what you do?
I think I'm just built different because I tell people I would work at the aquarium for free. Just don't tell them that. I enjoy this hobby so much because I get to use all the parts of my brain. I get to use the science and the chemistry and all that stuff, but I also get to be an electrician and I get to be a carpenter when I have to build stands, and I get to be a life support tech. I get to do it all, and I get to get my hands on a lot of different pumps and a lot of different projects. And I think that's what keeps it fresh for me, because there's always something to do, there's something to build, or there's always something to learn. I tell my guys when they first start working for me, it's like, you're not going to know everything. You think you might know everything. I don't know everything. I've been in this hobby for over 20 years. In the beginning, when I would get home from work, I would go to websites like it was East Coast Cichlid forums. I would go to YouTube. I used to watch a lot of bulk reef supplies. My favorite series was the 52 weeks of reef keeping, because they always had a new process or a new piece of technology or this or that. And I was like, just always learn. There's always something else. I don't consider myself to be the best aquarist in the world. I consider myself to be a good aquarist, but I can always be better. So I think the passion for always wanting to learn something new, wanting to build something new, want to create something like this business, I think that's the drive that keeps me going. And the fact that, again, when people come here, I get to talk to them, I get to educate them. I do want to run workshops, probably not now in the summertime, because I think everyone will just like disintegrate in this Texas heat. But I think once it starts to get cooler, I'll set up a couple tables, we'll do a workshop, and I'll show people how to perform husbandry, how to do water changes, how to pick flakes for your fish, so you're not just feeding them cornstarch like back in the day. But there's just so much. And there have been times in this hobby where I thought I was going to drop out. Back in New Jersey, we got hit by a really nasty hurricane. My house, the foundation collapsed. Not only did I lose every belonging I've ever owned, but I lost all my aquariums. And I thought I was done. And I just, for some reason, one day I just had a spark. I wanted to set up an aquarium, and I set it back up. About 5 years ago, I had a 150-gallon tank full of discus. I have pictures on my Facebook of this old tank, but there was thousands of dollars worth of discus in there. And one night I came home from work, and there was water all over my kitchen floor, and I looked at my tank, and all my fish were on the gravel. The seam busted at the bottom. I lost all those fish. So packing all that up, putting it in bags, taking it outside, I had tears coming from my eyes, and I was like, never again. But I lied, because I'm back at it again. It's just something, there's just a spark. There's just this thing inside me that will never let this truly go away. Like, yeah, life is like a roller coaster. You have ups, you have downs. But I try to keep that middle. I try to maintain the same focus, the same drive with everything that I do.
I feel your pain. I've not long experienced a tank split, coming in with just a substrate littered fish. I think many aquarists have been there. Disasters are just part and parcel of it. As much as you want to avoid them, they happen, and it's a note of your resolve if you can get back up and go, well, I still love keeping fish. I still love aquariums. We'll just deal with this over the next few days and then get up and go again, so to speak.
Yeah. So here's another thing too. That same hurricane that knocked down my house, that destroyed all my aquariums, it also affected the small aquarium that I was working at. So then I had to make a choice. I can either have a pity party for myself and just be miserable, or I can go to my building that has my 4,000-gallon aquarium and take care of those fish, because at that same time, that building had no power. So we had to build battery backups. We basically had marine boat batteries attached to a converter that changed from DC to AC, and then we had our bilge pumps, our little aerator pumps, and we had those kind of going. And every day we didn't have power for 4 days, so every day I would grab one of those marine batteries. I would drive it to my parents' house where we had the generator that was kind of running the sump pumps. I was pulling the water from the basement, and I would hook up the boat battery. I would charge it, and then I would drive back to the restaurant, hook up that battery, get ready to swap out the other one. And we would keep an eye on the fish. Obviously, we weren't feeding. We weren't doing anything. We were just like, we just need to maintain until we get power back. And once power came back, I was there when the lights came back, and I saw my fish, and I was like, good thing that I had my system on manual off. So I went downstairs. I backwashed all the sand filters, cleaned the pre-filters. I knew that stuff was going to be stinky, full of aerobic bacteria, and I was just like, no. So we give everything good flushing, turn the system back on, got it aerated, and then I was like, in the morning, we'll assess the damage. But yeah, again, disasters happen, but you have to learn like what you need to do to get the job done. Then you can have your pity party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's all good.
Cool. All right. So, Zen asked, what if your tap water comes out at 1 part per million ammonia, 2 part per million nitrite, and 40 parts per million nitrate? As long as the cycle takes care of it in a day or two, and I use Prime, is there any long-term issues from that?
So I know here in Texas, I don't want to say we deal with they don't use ammonia to clean our lines, but they do use a lot of chlorine. And I know there's days after like a heavy rainstorm, when I go to shower, the water smells like I'm in a public pool because there's that much chlorine gas in there. I know that there's some municipalities in the States that use like some type of ammonia to help clean the lines, or else they get filled up or whatever. If you know you have bad water in your area, you might want to invest in some type of RO unit. I don't want to say RODI because you don't have to go that crazy, but some type of RO or some type of carbon, something to just kind of reduce that organic waste before you put that in. Because on some of the Facebook groups that I'm at, some people are like, hey, have you noticed that the water's been testing and there's been this in the tap water? So everyone on the area is kind of alerted to like there might be ammonia based whatever in that water. There might be extra chlorine that we're not expecting. So yeah, it's just good to have a backup. I mean, I have RO filters all over my house just in case something happens. I have a way to clean water, filter it, and get into these tanks. Because yeah, I like Prime. Prime is an excellent product. Sodium thiosulfate with some I forgot what other buffering salts are in there. But I don't just want to depend on that because there are things that can slip through the cracks. And at least my belief with Prime and stuff, great product, but it only binds up the chlorine and the nitrite, but eventually it is going to become free again. So again, you don't want to rely on that. Like, this is going to save me. You want to make sure that your water source is safe to begin with.
Yeah. From memory, we spoke to Brian Miller, who works at Seachem, and he basically said that from memory, and probably paraphrasing a little bit, it does that, it binds it for a certain amount of time, which then allows the filter to catch up and do its job to process it properly. From memory, from what he said. So how long that period is, I can't remember off the top of my head. Whether it binds for 24 hours, 48, 72, I'm not sure. But yeah, the idea is it binds it, makes it non-toxic, and then allows the filter to process it in that period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You don't want to depend on. That's not like your fail safe. Like, that's why just make sure you have a good source of water, or you have some way to run it through a reverse osmosis filter, carbon black, just something, just to get you to that point.
Yep. How can the aquarium community support each other and grow together?
I think just sharing the knowledge. I mean, the fact that Facebook is what it is, and you can join a bunch of fish groups. What I don't like about the fish groups is they say like all questions are good, and someone will ask a very basic entry level question, and then everyone just like attack. It's not about that. Even if you're answering the same question like 50 times in a row, maybe sit this round out, let someone else answer the question about cycling, or is this a good food? But I do think in this world, people, especially online, they find little things and they argue and they fight and they do this. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, we're all in this hobby. We all love these fish, and we should be doing everything we can to create a welcoming, safe, and fun hobby. I mean, it is what it is. This is a hobby. This is. I was talking to my friend Charles from Lone Star Exotic Fish, and he was like, "Yeah, this is the most like this is the excess. Like, we don't need any of this, but we choose to do this. So, like,
Yeah, I think for me, because we're dealing with live animals, it brings up this next level of interest or passion from people. It's not like we're collecting a stamp where it's not alive, and if you care for it wrong, it's going to diminish, but it's not going to die. And I think that's where that extra level, and sometimes the extra level can become aggression or perceived as aggression, because the internet's really hard to read, can get people off track and can cause a few a few issues with people, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, like I said, that's why when I have an opinion that I know is going to be controversial, like I said, I say, hey, this is a Nelson hot take. This is my opinion, and you can take it or don't. But like, again, there's 1,000 ways to do something right. There's also 1,000 ways to do it wrong. It just depends on what works for you. But also, yeah, don't jump on the person who's asking because they just want to get into the hobby and they're just asking simple questions. Like, there's no reason to come at them that way. Just be welcoming, and if not, just again, sit that round out. You don't have to engage with every single comment. I had people on my YouTube and even TikTok that say things they're not great, but you know what I do? I just give them a thumbs up or I give them a like and I say, hey, thanks for your engagement. But yeah, I'm not going to lose sleep over that.
Engagement is engagement, and it works every way around. So we're getting towards the end of our structured questions that we've got for you. I'm just double checking the last little section here, as I think we might have jumped up and down a little bit and possibly already asked these, and that would be correct. Okay, so we like to end all of our Finatics Friday Coffee Dates with what we call the School of Six. So 6 very quick, short answer questions. They're not meant to put you on the spot, but sometimes they do. So I apologize early if that does happen. So my first question is, if you're doing a coin toss, heads or tails?
Pick heads or tails? Heads.
Heads. Cool. Are you a tea or a coffee drinker?
Coffee. Love coffee.
Cool. Do you think we're alone in the universe?
I don't have the hubris to say that. Yeah. I think that, we got lucky enough with the right combination of blah, 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 Neil deGrasse Tyson and all that stuff. But to say that there isn't something else, another spectacular 1 in a trillion chance of like some type of amoeba growing on some asteroid somewhere, who knows? But yeah, I don't think we're alone.
I like that. I like that rationale and how you've worked through that. If you could have a meal with anybody from any point in time, alive or dead, fictional or real, who would that be?
Maybe Bill Nye, because I remember watching him PBS. It inspired me to ask questions about things and want to learn and keep kind of pushing boundaries.
Cool. Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Rock. No one sees it coming.
And what is your unicorn fish that you could either keep, spawn, see in the wild, take photographs of? What is this one fish that you have never been around that you always want to be around of?
I personally am a fan of naso tangs, like unicorn tangs, flamingos. There's something about them. They're so personable. They have like little human characteristics. But yeah, just seeing them in aquariums, they're one of my favorite marine fish.
Cool. And my last question, which makes 7, not 6. Where can people find you if they want to know more about you, get involved in your business and what you're doing? And
at my house. No, you can follow us at Creekwood Aquatics, creekwoodaquatics.com. We got our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all under the same name, Creekwood Aquatics. We have our Google Voice line. We have our email chat bot. Smoke signal, I will find you. Don't worry about it.
Cool. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been fantastic. There has been some incredible information and knowledge shared about live food and culturing live food. So if you weren't with us earlier in this live stream, it's definitely worth catching up on, because you were very open with your methods and how you do stuff, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure that the people in the chat that have been watching will appreciate it as well. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
No,
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you, everybody that has been with us today. It's been fantastic. It's good to see everyone coming in and having a good chat and enjoying aquariums for what they are, which is just a lovely hobby. So, yeah. Have a good one, team. Happy fish keeping, and catch you all later.
Bye for now.
Thank you very much.